Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. Late October of 2022 found me pulling double shifts at a station just outside Columbus, Ohio, desperately trying to save up enough money to finally move out of my sister's basement. My 30th birthday had passed 2 months earlier, marked only by a gas station cupcake and a text from my mom asking when I'd get my life together. Not exactly a milestone celebration after dropping out of nursing school. But the night shifts paid decent, and usually nobody bothered me past midnight. The station sat at the corner of Route 23 and some back road whose name I never bothered learning. Surrounded by nothing but cornfields and the occasional farmhouse with windows that glowed yellow in the distance. That particular Thursday night had been dead since around 9, just me restocking the energy drinks and counting down the minutes until I could flip the sign and lock up at 2 in the morning. The woman came in at exactly 1:47. I remember because I just checked my phone, calculating how much longer until I could close the register and start mopping. She pushed through the door so quietly that the bell barely made a sound. Just this soft metallic whisper that made me glance up from the inventory clipboard. She wore this long beige coat that went down past her knees, the kind my grandmother used to call a duster, and her dark hair hung perfectly straight like she'd just brushed it 100 times. But it was her walk that caught my attention first. She moved across the floor without any of the usual sounds. No squeaking sneakers or clicking heels, just this weird gliding motion that reminded me of someone ice skating. When she reached the counter, she stood there for maybe 10 seconds without saying anything, just staring at a point somewhere behind my left ear. And when she finally spoke, her voice came out in this steady, measured rhythm, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized. "May I have the key to your bathroom, please?" Each word dropped from her mouth with the exact same spacing between them. No rush, no pause for breath, just this mechanical delivery that made the fluorescent lights above us seem suddenly too bright. Her hands stayed hidden in her coat pockets the entire time, and I noticed she hadn't blinked once since walking in. Those brown eyes just stayed wide open, the whites showing all around like someone had told her to keep them that way. The bathroom key hung on this ridiculous, oversized wooden paddle behind me. A system my manager, Gary, implemented after too many people walked off with it. And when I turned to grab it, I felt her presence shift closer to the counter. Even though I never heard her move, the smell hit me then, not unpleasant, but wrong somehow, like fresh laundry detergent mixed with something metallic, something that reminded me of the taste you get in your mouth right before you faint. I handed her the key and watched her fingers emerge from the coat pocket to take it. Pale, almost bluish under the harsh store lighting with nails filed down to nothing. She wrapped her hand around the wooden paddle without actually gripping it, just sort of letting it rest against her palm. And then she turned and glided toward the bathroom at the back of the store. The bathroom was maybe 30 feet from the counter, past the coffee machines and the wall of chips. And I watched her the whole way, waiting to hear her footsteps, but there was nothing except the hum of the refrigerators and the buzz of that one broken light fixture near the ATM. She reached the bathroom door, turned the handle with that same loose grip, and disappeared inside. The door closed with this heavy thunk that seemed too loud for how gently she'd pushed, and then everything went quiet again. Just me standing there behind the register, wondering why my chest felt so tight. 5 minutes passed, then 10, and I started getting anxious about closing time. The register still needed counting. The floors needed mopping, and I had this whole checklist Gary would review on the security cameras if I didn't complete it. But the woman hadn't come out yet, and the bathroom key was supposed to be returned to the counter. That was the whole point of the giant wooden paddle, to make sure people brought it back. At the 15-minute mark, I walked over to the bathroom door and knocked first softly, then harder when I got no response. "Ma'am, everything okay in there? We're closing in about 20 minutes. Nothing. Not even the sound of running water or the toilet flushing. Just this complete silence that made me press my ear against the door. The wood felt cold, way colder than it should have been, like someone had left a freezer open on the other side. That's when I heard it slam, the bathroom door hitting something hard, like someone had shoved it open with tremendous force. But I was standing right there, my hand still on the door handle, and it hadn't moved at all. The slam came from inside, from behind the door I was touching, which made no sense because there was nothing back there but a toilet, a sink, and 3 walls. I jumped back and waited, expecting the woman to come out, maybe embarrassed about dropping something or falling, but the door stayed shut. Another minute crawled by before I tried the handle, locked, of course, because that's how our bathroom worked. You needed the key to get in or out. My master key was in the office, and as I walked back there to get it, I kept glancing over my shoulder at that door, waiting for another slam that never came. The office was this cramped space behind the counter, barely big enough for a desk and the security monitor set. My hands fumbled with the key ring while my eyes stayed glued to the bathroom door through the office window, still closed, still silent. When I finally found the master key and headed back, I noticed something that made me stop mid-step. The coffee pot, which I'd turned off an hour ago, was steaming. Not brewing, just steaming, like someone had poured boiling water into the empty carf. The smell of burnt metal filled that corner of the store, and I had to cover my nose as I passed. At the bathroom door, I hesitated with the key in my hand, suddenly not wanting to know what was on the other side. But I had to check. Gary would review the cameras tomorrow, and how would I explain leaving someone locked in our bathroom overnight? The key turned easily, and I pushed the door open to find nothing. An empty bathroom, spotless like it had just been cleaned. No woman in a beige coat. No sign anyone had been there at all. The toilet seat was down. The sink was dry. Even the trash can was empty, except for the liner I'd put in during my shift. But the wooden paddle key wasn't there either. Not on the floor, not on the sink, nowhere. The fluorescent bulb above the mirror flickered once, casting weird shadows that made me back out quickly. I stood there in the chip aisle, staring at that empty bathroom, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The woman had definitely gone in there. I'd watched her, handed her the key myself, heard that door slam from the inside. Where could she have gone? There were no windows, no other doors, just those 3 walls and a 7-foot ceiling with panels that hadn't been disturbed in years. My first thought was to check outside. Maybe she'd somehow slipped past me when I went to the office, though I'd been watching that door the whole time through the window. The parking lot sat empty under those harsh sodium lights that turned everything orange. Just my beat-up Ford and the dumpster out back casting long shadows across the asphalt. No other cars, no woman walking down Route 23, nothing but cornstalks swaying in the October wind. The night had gotten colder, probably dropping into the 40s, and my breath came out in little white puffs as I walked the perimeter of the building. That's when I saw it. The wooden paddle key hanging from the outside door handle, swinging back and forth like someone had just placed it there seconds ago. Not dropped, not thrown, but carefully looped through the handle from the outside. My stomach did this weird flip as I grabbed it, the wood still carrying that strange coldness I'd felt on the bathroom door. Back inside, I locked the door and went straight to the office to check the security footage. We had 4 cameras, one on the register, one on the door, one covering the store floor, and one outside for the pumps. I rewound to 147, watching myself at the counter doing inventory, and then nothing. No woman entering the store. The door never opened, the bell never moved, but there I was on screen, looking up from my clipboard at absolutely nothing. Then the worst part, I watched myself turn around, grab the wooden paddle from the hook, and hold it out to empty air. My hand on the screen opened and closed like I was receiving something back. And then the paddle disappeared from view as I apparently handed it to nobody. On the camera, I was having a complete conversation with thin air, nodding, and watching something move across the store that didn't exist in the footage. The bathroom door opened and closed by itself on the store floor camera. And then there I was 15 minutes later, knocking on the door and talking to no one. I sat in that office chair for 20 minutes, replaying the footage over and over, trying to find any sign of the woman in the beige coat. Each replay made my skin prickle worse than before, especially the part where I held out my hand and the paddle key just vanished into nothing. The timestamp never changed. The footage never glitched. Everything looked perfectly normal except for the fact that I was interacting with someone who wasn't there. My mind raced through explanations, hallucinations, gas leak, exhaustion from too many double shifts, maybe even something wrong with the cameras. But the key had been real. The cold bathroom door had been real. And that slam from inside had definitely happened. I even pulled up the audio from the door camera and could hear my side of the conversation clear as day. "May I have the key to your bathroom, please?" Except it was just my voice asking, followed by silence where her response should have been. I never told Gary about what happened that night. How could I? The footage made me look insane, and I needed this job too badly to risk getting fired over something I couldn't explain. I finished my shift, mopped the floors, counted the register, and left everything exactly as it should be. But I couldn't stop thinking about that woman. The way she moved without sound, that perfectly measured voice, those unblinking eyes that had seemed so real when I was looking right at her. For weeks afterward, I'd tense up whenever someone came in late at night, especially women in long coats. The bathroom key still hangs on its wooden paddle behind the counter, and sometimes when I'm working alone, I catch myself staring at it, remembering that October night. I've never had anything like that happen again. And honestly, I hope I never do. Some things don't need explaining, and they just need to be survived and then left alone, filed away in that part of your brain where you keep the stuff that doesn't make sense, but definitely happened. The drive from Phoenix to Denver had become second nature after doing it twice a year for the past 5 years. At 26, visiting my sister and her kids was the highlight of my otherwise predictable life as an accountant. That particular Friday in August started like any other trip, throwing a duffel bag in my Camry around 8 at night, planning to drive straight through and catch breakfast with my nephews Saturday morning. The desert heat was finally breaking as darkness fell, and I remember feeling energized about the 14-hour stretch ahead. My phone was loaded with new podcasts, the cooler packed with Red Bulls and water bottles, and I had that familiar excitement of hitting the open road when most people were settling in for the night. The first few hours flew by with me singing along to old songs and watching the city lights fade into the darkness of the desert. Around 2 in the morning, somewhere past Flagstaff, but still a good distance from the New Mexico border, my fuel gauge started hovering near empty. The highway had been particularly desolate for the last hour. Just me, the occasional long-haul trucker, and miles of darkness broken only by our headlights cutting through the night. My GPS showed a gas station about 3 miles ahead, someplace called Desert Stop 24, right off exit 287. The name didn't ring any bells from previous trips, but new stations pop up all the time along these routes, especially the generic 24-hour places that cater to travelers like me. As I took the exit, the station came into view. A small, isolated building with 4 pumps under harsh fluorescent lights that made everything look washed out and strange. Only one other vehicle was there, a beat-up pickup truck parked off to the side, not at any of the pumps. I pulled up to pump number 3, killed the engine, and stepped out into the cool desert air. The silence hit me immediately. That complete absence of sound you only get in the middle of nowhere, where even the insects seemed to have gone to bed. The credit card reader on the pump was one of those ancient models that takes forever to process. And while I waited, I glanced through the station's window. The fluorescent lights inside were even harsher than the ones above the pumps, creating the stark, almost medical brightness that made the aisles look like they belonged in a hospital rather than a convenience store. I could see someone behind the counter, just a silhouette from where I stood, not moving much, maybe reading something. After what felt like minutes, the pump finally approved my card and I started filling up, leaning against my car and scrolling through my phone while the numbers on the display slowly climbed. The receipt printed with that distinctive grinding sound old printers make. And as I reached for it, something made me pause. There was writing on it. Not the usual printed text about gallons purchased and price per gallon, but actual handwriting in blue pen scrolled across the white paper in rushed, uneven letters. "Don't go inside. Call 911. My first thought was that someone was messing with me. Maybe the last customer playing some stupid prank. I even looked around, half expecting to see teenagers hiding behind the dumpster with their phones out recording my reaction for some social media video. But there was nobody, just me, my car, that abandoned pickup, and the two bright stations sitting there like a glowing box in the darkness. The handwriting looked fresh, though, the ink still slightly smudged where someone had gripped the paper too hard while writing. I stood there for probably 30 seconds, just staring at those words while the pump handle clicked in my hand, signaling the tank was full. Part of me wanted to just get back in my car and leave, but I needed caffeine badly, and my bladder was starting to protest after 3 Red Bulls. Plus, the rational part of my brain kept insisting this had to be a joke. Who leaves warning notes on gas pump receipts? If something was really wrong, wouldn't they just call the cops themselves? I put the pump handle back, crumpled the receipt into my pocket, and walked toward the entrance. The automatic doors wheezed open with a mechanical groan that sounded like they hadn't been serviced in years, and the air conditioning hit me like a wall, way too cold for a desert night, cranked up to meat locker levels. The smell hit me next. This weird combination of industrial floor cleaner and something else, something metallic and sharp that sat in the back of my throat. The guy behind the counter looked up when I entered, and immediately something felt wrong about the whole picture. He was wearing a Desert Stop 24 uniform shirt that was at least 2 sizes too small, stretched tight across his chest and arms like he'd grabbed the wrong shirt from a locker. His name tag said Brandon, but it was crooked, held on by 1 pin instead of 2. But it was his face that really got me. He had this expression like someone had just told him his dog died, but he had to keep smiling for a photo. His eyes kept flicking to something behind me. Then to the back of the store, where a door marked employees only, stood slightly ajar, then back to me, never quite making actual eye contact. When he spoke, his voice came out all wrong, too high, and strained like he was being squeezed around the middle. Help you, not can I help you? Or how's it going? Just help you. Like he'd forgotten how customer service greetings were supposed to work. Just need to use the bathroom, I said, trying to keep my voice casual even though every instinct was starting to scream at me to leave. Brandon's face twitched, this little spasm around his left eye, and he pointed toward the back without saying anything. That's when I noticed his hand. There were dark stains under his fingernails, reddish-brown like dried rust or maybe blood, and his knuckles had fresh scratches across them. As I started walking toward the bathroom, I heard it. A soft thump from behind that employee door, like something heavy shifting position. Brandon immediately started coughing. These loud, fake-sounding coughs that nobody would believe were real, clearly trying to cover up the noise. The bathroom was past the employee door, down this narrow hallway lined with boxes of inventory, and as I walked by that slightly open door, I caught a glimpse of movement through the crack. Someone was in there standing very still in the darkness, and I could just make out the outline of what looked like a shoulder and part of an arm pressed against the wall, like they were hiding just out of sight. My whole body went rigid, but I forced myself to keep walking normally, like I hadn't seen anything. The bathroom door was one of those heavy metal ones that locks from the inside, and the second I got in there, I turned the deadbolt and pulled out my phone. My fingers were trembling as I pulled the crumpled receipt from my pocket and looked at it again. The warning was still there, that messy blue handwriting suddenly seeming a lot less like a prank and a lot more like someone's desperate attempt to save my life. Through the thin walls, I could hear voices now. Brandon's high-stressed tone and another voice deeper and angrier coming from that employee room. They were arguing about something, though I couldn't make out the words. Then I heard a third voice, muffled and weak, saying something that sounded like, "Please." That's when the reality hit me. Whoever wrote that note was probably the real Brandon, and these people, whoever they were, had him somewhere in that back room. I pulled up the phone's keypad and started dialing 911, but then stopped. There was no cell signal, not even one bar. The bathroom had no windows, just a ventilation grate near the ceiling that was way too small to squeeze through. And the only way out was back through that hallway, past the employee door, past whoever was hiding there. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, trying to think when footsteps started coming down the hallway. Slow, deliberate steps that stopped right outside the bathroom door. The handle jiggled once, twice, then whoever it was knocked. 3 solid bangs that echoed in the small space. "You okay in there?" It was the fake Brandon's voice, but different now. Lower and more controlled, like he'd dropped the act. "Been in there a while, friend. Everything all right?" The word friend came out sharp and cold, nothing friendly about it at all. Flushed the toilet and ran the water, buying time. My mind racing through options that all seemed to end with me not making it out of this place. "Yeah, just a minute," I called back. Surprised my voice came out steady when every muscle in my body was wound tight as piano wire. The footsteps didn't move away. I could see the shadow of feet under the door gap, just standing there waiting. I turned the water off and knew I had to make a choice fast. Staying locked in here wasn't an option. They'd eventually force the door or wait me out. My car keys were in my pocket. My Camry sitting maybe 40 feet from the entrance, still running smooth from the fill-up. But those 40 feet might as well have been 40 mi if they decided to stop me. Then I remembered the pickup truck parked off to the side. If these guys had driven here, it was probably theirs, which meant at least 2 of them, maybe more. The shadow under the door shifted, and I heard him lean against the door, testing its strength with a subtle push that made the metal creak. Time was running out, and that note in my pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric. Someone's last attempt to prevent exactly what was about to happen to me. I made my decision. Taking a deep breath, I unlocked the door and pulled it open fast, like ripping off a Band-Aid. The fake Brandon stumbled back a step, clearly not expecting me to come out so suddenly. "Sorry, man," I said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to me. Those gas station burritos from earlier really did a number on me. He stared at me for a second, his eyes flat and calculating, then stepped aside to let me pass. Walking down that hallway felt like walking through quicksand, every step deliberate and measured, trying not to run when every cell in my body was screaming to sprint. As I passed the employee door, it had been pulled completely shut, but I could hear movement inside, shuffling feet and what sounded like someone being dragged across the floor. The fake Brandon was right behind me, following close enough that I could hear his breathing. This ragged sound like he was fighting to keep himself under control. When we reached the main store area, I saw the second man, tall and thin with a shaved head, wearing jeans and a black jacket despite the August heat, standing by the entrance like he'd been waiting there the whole time. "Bathroom's all yours," I said to nobody in particular, trying to project casual indifference while my legs carried me toward the door. The tall man moved slightly, not quite blocking my path, but positioning himself so I'd have to brush past him to leave. Up close, I could see a tattoo creeping up his neck, some kind of snake or dragon design that disappeared into his collar, and his eyes were bloodshot like he hadn't slept in days. "Forgot something," he said, his voice growly and low. "You didn't pay for gas." My heart nearly stopped, but I managed to pull the receipt from my pocket, the one with the warning, and held it up, careful to keep the written side facing me. "Already paid at the pump," I said. He looked at the receipt, then at me, then at fake Brandon, who had moved behind the counter again for 5 seconds. That felt like 5 hours. Nobody moved. Then the tall man stepped aside just barely enough for me to squeeze past. "Drive safe," he said, and there was something in those 2 words that made them sound like a threat rather than well wishes. The moment I pushed through those automatic doors, I speed-walked to my car, every instinct telling me not to run because running would confirm I knew something was wrong. My fingers fumbled with the keys as I heard the doors wheeze open behind me again, and when I glanced back, both men were standing just inside the entrance, watching me through the glass. The Camry started on the first try, and I reversed out of there faster than was safe, my tires squealing against the concrete. As I pulled onto the access road, I looked in the rear view mirror and saw them still standing there, 2 dark silhouettes against the harsh fluorescent backdrop. My phone suddenly buzzed with signal as I merged onto the highway, and I immediately pulled over about a mile down, my whole body shaking now that the adrenaline was starting to wear off. The 911 operator answered on the second ring, and I told her everything: the note, the fake employee, the voices in the back room, the second man by the door. She kept me on the line while units were dispatched, and I sat there on the shoulder of the highway, watching my mirrors for any sign of that pickup truck following me. 20 minutes later, I was giving my statement to a state trooper while 3 patrol cars and an ambulance surrounded that gas station like a scene from a movie. They found the real Brandon, a 19-year-old kid who'd been working the night shift, tied up with zip ties and duct tape in the storage room, beaten pretty badly but alive. The 2 men were brothers named Jason and Kyle Brennan, both with outstanding warrants for armed robbery in Nevada, apparently hitting isolated gas stations along remote highways. The kid had managed to write that warning on a stack of receipt paper when they first came in and threatened him with a gun, hoping someone would see it before walking into their trap. The trooper told me I was lucky. Most people would have ignored the note or thought it was a joke, and the brothers had gotten increasingly desperate and violent with each robbery. They'd been in there for 3 hours before I showed up, waiting for the perfect victim, someone traveling alone in the middle of the night with out-of-state plates. The younger kid from the ambulance, Brandon, asked to talk to me before they took him to the hospital, his face swollen and one eye completely shut, and he just said, "Thanks for calling," in this raspy voice that broke a little at the end.